Hi, I'm Reece Atkinson, founder of Gibbs Golf. Thanks for tuning in. I'm talking to you from the Knightsbridge Golf School. We're on a full equipment assessment, fitting and workshop service. I wanted to talk to you today a little bit about wedges, the technology in wedges, and also the features that you might want to consider before you buy your next wedge or wedges. So this is the Callaway MD3. We also have the MD Forged, and we also work with all the other brands as well. So we have the SM6 Vokies, we've got the Glide 2.0s, we've got the Cleveland RTX models. So lots of choice, and all of these brands have got some great technology, really, really good. I think the technology's improved a huge amount over sort of the last 5 or 6 years. And also the sort of iterations that you have, the choice that you have in terms of the sole grinds, the bounces, the loft options, is absolutely huge. More choice can be a little bit more confusing. So I think I'd always recommend, if you come down to see us, we can go through, we would typically do our fittings outside where we use our Horsham Golf and Fitness venue. We have a great little short game area where you can try all the brands, all the lofts, all the bounces, all the grinds, and really dial in and find out what is appropriate for you and your particular game and your particular build. So with that in mind, I think I would definitely say don't just go out and buy the latest club because it might not have the features that are going to be most appropriate for you. And from a fitting specialist point of view, what are the sort of things that I consider from a wedge fitting perspective? Well, obviously we're going to get the length right. Okay, we're going to make sure it's not too short, so you can still sit up to it with a good posture. Lie angle, we're going to get that absolutely right as well, for exactly the same reason. And in a more lofted club, it's more important to get the lie angle right than even the longer irons because that will seriously have an influence on your direction of shot and dispersion. So that's obviously important. We'll get the shaft right. Typically that runs from the set down into the wedges quite nicely. Some players, where they don't feel like they're playing a full shot with the wedges, sometimes like to go a little heavier and sometimes a little bit softer in the flex with the wedge. That's fine, that's preference, we can look at that. And also the grip choice as well always comes down into it. But if we just look at the actual features and the technology in the club head itself, what are the sort of things that I would consider before when looking at you and getting it right for you? Well, certainly loft and gapping and the yardages you hit is one of the first points that we would look at. So typically wedges these days can range anything from 44 degrees, which is really low, all the way up to like 47, 48 degrees. If your sand wedge is about 56 degrees, then there's going to be quite a big gap between those two clubs. Now, there's different ways of filling that. You can either hit a softer baby wedge, if you like, take a little bit of pace off the swing and therefore bridge that gap in that direction or in that way. Or you can hit your sand wedge a little bit harder. And if you go a little bit harder at the sand wedge, typically all that happens is you just create more spin. You lose control of the distance anyway. It doesn't actually go that much further, especially in windy conditions, and your dispersion will go, out the window a little bit. So not a great way of doing it. And if you're not sort of comfortable or happy hitting the softer shot with the wedge, then best way to bridge that gap is with a different loft, something like a 50 or a 51 or a 52 degree. And then you might want to go for something a bit more specialist, like a 60, a 64, a 58, something like that in terms of the higher lofts for those cute little tricky shots around the green. So that's a big part of the consideration of what sort of loft the set makeup you might have. I always remember Jan Squire, who was a caddy for Jeev Mukesh. I was talking to her about Jeev's yardages, and she said there's always a gap somewhere. She said just where it's going to be and how you're going to manage it. So loft obviously is a big part of it. Then you want to start thinking, okay, it's loft, but then it's also the grind and the sole width. Okay, so we've got this is the MD3 model here, and you can see here, this is actually a standard sole in terms of Callaways. They have an S. They also have a W, which is a wide sole, which just literally be a wider sole. And the wider the sole is, the more effective bounce you have on it. Bounce is definitely is what stops the club from digging into the ground. Okay, so it's pretty important. So it's a relationship between the back edge and the leading edge here. And the lower the back edge is in relation to the leading edge, the more bounce there is, and the more it will prevent from digging into the ground. Okay, that's really important. You want to keep the speed of the club up through the shot. You don't want it digging in and losing speed, because then you lose control of distance, you lose control of spin, and you lose control of trajectory as well. So it's really important to get that right combination of sole width, so the wide sole can really help there. So think about the sort of turf conditions you're typically playing on your golf course. Are they soft? Out the sand, of course, is very soft as well, so you want to make sure that you've got lots of bounce on there, and perhaps in combination with a wider sole. The other sole that Callaway have got is a C grind, okay, which gives you more versatility. And when you talk about C grind, it's actually the shape of the grind. So they typically have some heel relief in this section, and they also have some toe relief in this section. It creates a C shape on the sole of the club. Now that's great for versatility. It means you can get the club into more tricky lies. You can also ensure that when you open the face up, okay, so when you open the face up, typically that leading edge will actually come a little bit higher. So by having the heel relief, it means you can actually open the face up without raising the leading edge too much and still get the club underneath the ball. So great for versatility, but then not quite so good in terms of forgiveness. Okay, you don't get away with quite as much if you don't strike it quite precisely enough. The other things you look at on the sole are things like camber. Okay, so actually you're talking about the actual curvature of the face from front of the club into the back edge. Okay, that is actually good for versatility in terms of the loft direction, but also it's good for making sure, once again, you keep that club head moving through the shot with a bit of speed to keep control of trajectory, spin, and launch. So, and the other thing you've got to talk about in terms of the shaping of the sole or the radius, if you like, that's this section here. So you're talking about how much curvature is in this section. This is the radius. This has got quite a tight radius and therefore quite a lot of curvature, which I quite like. I feel like it helps me get the club right down to the bottom of the golf ball. And once again, from this direction, it gives you a little bit more versatility in those tricky sort of lies. So you've got radius, you've got width of sole, you've got bounce, which we've spoken about already as well. So back edge to leading edge relationship, the width of sole in combination with that is pretty important. When you're deciding on which one is right for you, we also take into consideration the turf conditions you might be playing around your golf course, like we said already, but also your style of swing. So if you're a little bit steeper into soft conditions, then certainly more bounce, a bit more width might be appropriate. If you're a little bit more shallow into the ball, or maybe it's a bit more hard pan, you don't want too much bounce, otherwise it'll bounce the club up and maybe start to thin the ball. So it's important to get that blend right. And then we look at the face technology, okay. If we look at this, we can see there's a certain number of grooves. This one actually has 16 grooves up and down the face. And all the brands now they're getting so precise with the engineering side of things, they're able to make the groove more or less aggressive depending on which loft of club they're actually designing there. So with the 50 degrees, like the more pitching wedge lofts, 50, 48, and a little bit lower, the side wall of the groove is going to be around about 30 degrees, okay? So it's a slightly less aggressive groove. When you start to move down to the middle lofts, like the sand wedge at 56 degrees, 54 degrees, then the grooves become a little bit more aggressive, more like 20-degree walls. And then with the more lofted clubs where it's more of a glancing blow with that great, much bigger amount of loft, then you have a more aggressive groove, more like 5 degrees. And the idea behind all that is to make sure that the spin is consistent through the lofts, and you get a consistent reaction, and you get the right sort of amount of spin depending on what sort of shot you're trying to play. So the way it works in terms of ball contact with the face, you've got the ball here, club is going to come in, typically with the wedge is coming down into the ball on a descending blow. What is going to happen is actually as the club starts to move through, the ball tries to ride up the face, skid up the face, and it comes off. Now if there's not very much friction there, the ball tends to slide up quite rapidly, comes off quite high, and with not a huge amount of spin. If you create more spin, more friction, and they do that with the groove, of course, and they also do it with the roughness of texture, probably a milling pattern in Callaway's case, then the roughness of texture and the friction that's created there, what actually happens is same sort of thing. The ball's trying to move up the face, but because it's being held there, it's actually winding itself up and creating more spin. So as the club comes through and the ball finally takes off, it comes off, rather than comes off high, it actually comes off much lower and with more spin. Okay, so while you don't need grooves or roughness of face to actually create spin, you do need it to create consistency of spin and a certain amount of spin. So technology there is pretty important. All the brands have got their own variation, and I think it's a case of trying it out to find out which one works best for you. So that's the face technology. You also want to consider things like the shape of the actual profile of the head as well. So this one's got quite a high toe, which I think is quite a nice feature for a wedge perspective, where a lot of the time you're pulling the club across the ball a little bit. So it gives you a little bit more margin of error. So that's pretty much most of the features there. Obviously, you've got things like offset, how much the face is set back away from the middle of the shaft. That will create a certain look and feel. It creates a little bit of difference in terms of launch conditions as well. The hosel itself, or the other things that the brands are really focusing on, is positioning of weight, like they do with the driver, like they do with the irons, like they do with the woods. If they get the weight in the right area, they can control performance. In the case of the wedge, what they typically try and do is try and raise the centre of gravity higher up the face. Okay, the more they do that, the more they can start the ball a little bit lower and create more spin. So the way that Callaway have done it in this particular instance is they've drilled these holes out, removed the weight from that section, okay, and then they positioned it slightly higher at the face to create that higher centre of gravity and get that low launch, high spin effect. In the RTX model, they've taken weight away from, like 9 grams of weight away from the hosel, for example. Even in this particular model, you could see that actually the neck of that starts quite wide there, and then it tapers down into this section here. So once again, that'll be for a weight displacement reason, but also it helps them blend the neck of on the hosel of the club into this power area and into the face, which is aesthetically appropriate, appeals, and gives you a bit more face area for hitting from as well. So weight placement, centre of gravity placement is also a big part of this. So I think all in all, you can see there's a lot involved. There's a lot of reasons to choose a certain configuration. We'd love to help you with that. If you've got any questions, you can give us a call, or you can go to our website. But in any case, if you like the video, if the information's been good, please hit subscribe, and we'll try and do more of these. And thanks for tuning in, like I said. I look forward to seeing you again soon.